All right, so next point I'd like to bring up on this show, Matt, and this is, I think, a really good summary of what's happened so far, is prominent Russian, uh, let's call him soldier of fortune, Igor Girkin. Have you heard of him, Matt?
I have, yes.
Okay, well, tell us what you know about him, because I want to read some of his scathing commentary about his own country's military performance with you and Dave.
Well, I mean, in all honesty, he's most likely a war criminal himself. He's he was the minister of defense, if you will, for the Donetsk People's Republic uh, in the Donetsk region. Not terribly long though, from my understanding. He was only there for a couple months, but I mean, he is uh, a Russian nationalist to say the least. Let's put it that way.
He's a Russian nationalist who came to Ukraine right after the illegal annexation of Crimea and started stirring up fighting in eastern Ukraine and basically took the lead in that. And I guess he left after a certain period in frustration with Russia not doing enough. He's a big history buff of Russian military history, very well read. Actually enjoyed reading his commentary because of his copious analogies to the Second World War. And I want to go over what he said, which I think really frames where we are strategically. And this is where, Matt, I think your background as an intelligence officer, but also as a nuclear war theorist or scholar, I guess, I'd like to see, because we're really getting into game theory here now with what's going on. And Igor Girkin is one of the few people, I guess, who can get away with openly criticizing on whatever social media channels the Russian special military operation, otherwise known as a war. And he said, one of my comrades who came back from the frontline for reorganization asked to briefly and clearly sum up and express my thoughts that I listed in discussion with him, revolving around my pessimism towards the success of the second stage of the special military operation. He believes someone might find this useful. I think that no one from those making decisions will pay any attention, but I made a promise, so here it is. So he said, first, from our side, after the successful completion of the stage of the operation, which ended with a large-scale retreat from Kiev, Chernihiv, and Sumy, a relocation and concentration of the forces in the Donetsk region of the front line has occurred. Most likely, and according to the official statements of the political command and Russian forces, this is precisely where they are planning to conduct the second stage and complete the objective of totally clearing the territories of Lugansk, Donetsk People's Republic of the enemy's formations. Obviously, they count on creating 2 to 3 offensive groups with enough manpower, which, when concentrated with all available aviation and majority of artillery forces, will break through the Ukrainian forces, which are still, for some reason, not appreciated highly enough, and destroy them in one battle. From the Ukrainian armed forces side, the plans of Russian forces are very clear to them, and they do not at all consider this defeat inevitable. In fact, the opposite. The Ukrainian armed forces are planning to defend their highly fortified positions, relying on old and newly created, Russian armed forces gave them plenty of time for that, positions at assumed directions of Russian forces strikes, which are obvious. Just look at the map. Let's ask a question. Can the supremacy of Russian armed forces in aviation and heavy weaponry guarantee a victory over the enemy, for whom the offensive plans are obvious, who's in prepared defense? And he basically goes on to say they can't do it. They don't have enough combat power. It's about even on personnel on each side. The Pentagon today just briefed that there's more tanks on the Ukrainian side now due to arms deliveries and tanks on the Ukrainian side than the Russian side. So this is tank country. Boom, all of a sudden Ukrainians have more tanks, and now the heavy artillery is getting poured across the border by the United States, and now all other NATO countries are pouring that across. It basically seems, according to his analysis, he basically said, look, we either go deep, we try and envelop the entire, we go all the way to the Dnipro River, meet it from the north and south at the Dnipro. But he said, look, given our force structure and the way the Ukrainians have been fighting the fortified positions, we basically can't do it. And he said, they've been mobilizing since February 24th. He said in the summer, they're going to bring in divisions, like mobilized divisions with all this new equipment. He said, "Why?" A couple more divisions into the fight. It's really a very interesting position because the race to mobilize is being won by Ukraine. The weapons are Ukraine's getting more weapons now than Russia in terms of replacements. All of a sudden, the battle of attrition is not only manpower wise, but starting to be material wise in favor of Ukrainian forces. So I just wanted to get your commentary and thoughts on that, Matthew, and what are Putin's options here? I mean, what can he do to get out of this, or is his only option left, as Igor is calling for, full mobilization, which even if he does it, is going to take time.
Yeah, a lot of stuff to talk about in that. I think just right off the bat, I want to at least mention that I'm always a little leery of being a little bit too numbers focused when it comes to equipment and tanks and things like that. A great example is simply because, when this started, the Russians had, gobs of tanks and they had all of the heavy weapons that they needed, what they thought they needed at least. But it proved not to be enough. They weren't really trained very well on that equipment, and they allowed the Ukrainians to take advantage of their weakness. So I think that, yes, it's good, certainly good news that the Ukrainians now have more tanks than the Russians do. Hopefully, they're able to use them better than the Russians certainly were. But I think that's one of the components that we're going to have to wait and see going forward. Of, yes, the Ukrainians now have these, but are they sophisticated enough? Are they well trained enough on them? No matter what type of tanks they are they well trained enough to actually use them effectively? I think if I were to speculate, I think that they probably will be able to use them effectively.